This is the beginning of chapter 14. It's divided into several smaller sections, so I hope it's not too much, and I hope they all get watched in order. So here's our map of Europe, and as I hinted at last time, the Protestant Reformation is taking hold, that many people are disagreeing with the Pope, that are finding that that they can no longer follow the Pope in his teachings. And we'll get into more of that. The 17th century was a time of religious and political upheavals in Europe as the competition for human souls heated up. In Italy, the heart of the Baroque was Rome, the seat of power of the Roman Catholic Church. As we saw last time, the Pope undertook many projects to elevate the Church and solidify its place as the only true Christian faith. And here's a slide just about how things were going after Martin Luther's theses. This was a period of Catholic resurgence initiated in response to the Protestant Reformation, beginning with the Council of Trent and ending at the close of the 30 Years' War. Initiated to preserve the power, influence, and material wealth enjoyed by the Catholic Church and to present a theological and material challenge to Reformation, the Counter-Reformation was a comprehensive effort composed of 5 major elements: a reactionary defense of Catholic sacramental practice, ecclesiastical or structural reconfiguration, religious orders, spiritual movements, and political dimensions. One issue dealt with at the Council of Trent was visual art, and this was basically to make art more intense, more emotional, and to engage the viewer more sincerely. As rulers' economic power waned, artists found patrons in the church and urban middle class. Baroque art deliberately evokes intense emotional responses from viewers. A version of classicism also arose, inspiring portraiture, genre painting, still lifes, and religious scenes in lifelike fashion. So it's also a little bit difficult to communicate to students today how very much the center of attention the art world was at this time. You have to keep in mind that there was no popular culture. Well, this was the popular culture. This is what people were talking about. This was all the buzz. So artists were like entertainers today or sports figures. So they were at the center of all publicity. So here's 2 of the major figures in Rome that cannot be overstated, their significance. On the left, we have Gian Lorenzo Bernini. He is a sculptor. His father was a sculptor, and he trained him from a young boy. We have some early teenage works of Bernini as well. He had a very long, very prolific, successful career. And on the right is his major patron, the Pope. So I just told you how the Catholic Church was sort of upping its game and trying to make itself more obviously the center of the Christian world. And part of that was the remodel of St. Peter's. So old St. Peter's was destroyed, and the new St. Peter's was built and needed a lot of artwork. So when Pope Urban VIII became Pope in 1623, Gian Lorenzo Bernini was sort of at the beginning of his career, and the artist and the art patron joined forces to redesign most of Rome. So let's see what they did together. So here's some views of St. Peter's. On the left is a print that I believe is supposed to represent how the new St. Peter's was being constructed while the old St. Peter's was sort of small and left intact until the very end, and then it was destroyed. And in this picture down here on the lower left, this I showed you earlier, should remind you that the blue line was the Roman Circus of Nero. These small red lines in here were the structure of Old St. Peter's, and New St. Peter's is this very large gray outline. So the church is made much, much larger. It's given a much larger footprint in Vatican City, and you will see the fruits of that very soon. On the right, we have a period painting of the interior, which sort of gives you an idea of scale. So you can see how tall people are back here, these adult humans, and how huge these sculptures and the niches are, and how very tall the structure. So we're going to look at this little canopy right in the middle as our sort of first focus. Pope Urban VIII gave Bernini the task of designing the bronze baldacchino, or canopy, over the crypt of St. Peter's. The crypt was the underground burial place of the saint. He chose a form of winding grapevines to encircle copies of columns from Solomon's temple in Jerusalem. Emblems of honeybees, suns, and laurel leaves signifying Urban's family, the Barberini, are also prominent in the design. I'll show you some details very soon. So as you look at this baldacchino, and I just showed you that painting where there were humans in the picture. There's no humans in this one, so I have to emphasize and describe the size of this. The baldacchino is 8 stories high. That's 100 feet high. And I have to tell you that because within the space of St. Peter's, it seems small because St. Peter's is so huge. So the top of this is 8 stories above the ground. This is a human level handrail here. And there are some humans over here. So maybe you can get a sense of the scale. So let's look at this a little bit closer. This is now looking from the nave towards the apse of the church through the baldacchino, which sits at the crossing of the, I guess you could call it a transept, even though this is a newly redesigned structure. So it's got 4 twisted columns on each corner and then this little roof-like structure. On the roof, on each of the corners, there's a figure of an angel that is bronze with gold robes and golden wings. And each angel is holding these chains. I think they're garland chains, like something that's made to look alive. And the idea was that the angels have just dropped down this crown-like shape from heaven to rest it atop the grave of Peter down here. So, as typical with Bernini, it's very complex, and there's a lot of symbolism here. There's a lot of bees, like it was described. That's from the Bernini family. The Bernini family, the Barberini family crest. And the bronze that was used to make this was salvaged from the doors of the Pantheon in Rome. So the ancient Roman Pantheon, which you saw in the Rome chapter, had been stripped of its doors in order to create this baldacchino. Now look through it and you can see the altar, and I'm going to show you this next. It's kind of a bonus feature, but I think it's pretty illustrative of Bernini's skill and his artistry. So this is a view now of the altar area without the baldacchino. And you can see this half dome up here. There's windows indicating that this structure is on the exterior of the building, so there's sunlight right outside. A very important fact, which you will see. So let's get in closer here. So here it is. The center of this altarpiece, the thing that really grabs your attention, of course, is the stained glass, sort of a starburst in the center that's glowing, and there's a bird in there, and the bird represents the Holy Spirit. And then this explosion of the presence of the Holy Spirit has been embellished with these golden rays that shoot out from it, and these golden clouds. You can see some of the detail over here, this little detail of many, many putti. Putti are, of course, the little cherub type little baby angels, and they're part of this huge explosion. This is such a Baroque piece. Down at the bottom, another centerpiece is this structure right here, and I have to tell you what it is. Some students can identify it, but just in case you can't, it is a chair, but it's a chair reliquary. So what you're seeing is an outer shell that holds within it a simple wooden chair. And it was believed by the Pope and all the church fathers that that chair had actually been sat upon by Peter when he was in Rome. So it is symbolic of that role of Peter as the head of the Church of Rome. And of course, Peter was one of Jesus's disciples, and so situating him in Rome as the head of the church and all subsequent popes as descending from him give them this authority, this unquestionable authority. And that's what this is all about. Okay, now as you're looking at this and you've seen how fabulous this glow is, I have to remind you that this is done in the 17th century, and there is no electricity in the 17th century. So Bernini created this illusion, this spectacle of this glowing orb of the Holy Spirit dove by having a window behind this and the sunlight being brought down into this by the use of mirrors and channels. I'll show you another place where he did this a little later, and I can actually show you the structure, but I don't have the structure at St. Peter's. But this was his engineering. This was his genius, that he wanted it to glow, and so he brought sunlight behind the stained glass to make it glow. Now here's another part that Bernini did. So Bernini also supervised the design and building of a colonnade, that means a group of columns, to enclose the double piazza in front of the church, which already contained an Egyptian obelisk and a fountain. So here's the Egyptian obelisk, and there are two small fountains here. And this was designed by Bernini. This was not. So I did discuss the design of the church earlier, the design of New St. Peter's. So Bernini characterized these colonnades as the motherly arms of the church, reaching out to embrace all people of the world. And it's in this oval space and this space leading up to the steps of St. Peter's, where people gather for the Pope's blessings on Christmas and Easter and other days. This is just a view of St. Peter's from the ground level, so you can kind of see how massive it is. And these barricades are put for a holiday event, like I just described, so to help control the masses of people that gather there. And you can see also the obelisk. But in the picture just before, the obelisk doesn't look that huge. This is really an enormous church. Now let's look at some of Bernini's sculpture, because that's what I think of Bernini as primarily a sculptor, a carver of marble. So this is his David, and it dates from 1623. And I just want you to look at this and realize that this is a new imagination, a new imagining of David. Bernini's statue of David introduced a new type of three-dimensional composition that interacts with the space around the viewer. So his body is twisted. He's brought his arms way around to his right side. And you could walk around, completely around this sculpture, and you would find it interesting and compelling and very dramatic. So let's look at some details of this. Here's some more from other points of view. And look at the detail of his face, where David is not in a state of repose. He is not reflecting back on his successful killing of Goliath. He is not really anticipating. He's just in this hyper-focused mode of being about to hurl the stone. And so this is completely different from the Davids that we saw earlier. Now, I have to remind you, the top two Davids were from the early Renaissance, showing David after he had killed Goliath, standing very much like a classic Greek sculpture. And Michelangelo's David from the high Renaissance below, where that David is staring at Goliath, trying to imagine his ability or his completion of his task. And now we get Bernini. So both of these have, or all of these, all three of those seem to have the goal of showing a perfect nude male, and that perfection and calm and strength are all part of it. Bernini, on the other hand, is showing us the drama, the action, the moment of movement. This David is not at rest. He is charged. He is moving. Even his hair is all messed up. So it's quite different in concept. I hope you can clearly see that. So we've moved into a new form of expression, and this is in large part because of the Counter-Reformation, because after the Protestant Reformation in the North, the Catholic Church countered with saying, we've got to make art more intense, more dramatic. We want people to feel it intensely. And so you get drama and action. Now, speaking of drama and action, this is my very favorite Bernini. I consider this a bonus feature, so I hope you'll bear with me. This is a classical subject. After a certain point in Bernini's life, he decided not to do any more pagan subjects, but he was only going to do religious subjects. And that is also because of the Counter-Reformation, because there were religious movements within Catholicism that brought people to have a more intense personal relationship with God. So anyway, but this is before that time. So we have a classical subject. Apollo is the sun god, and Daphne is a wood nymph or a water nymph. I think she's a wood nymph. And Cupid is the unseen actor in this story. Cupid, as you probably know, is a little Puto who has a bow and arrow. He's the son of Aphrodite, also known as Venus, the goddess of love. And Cupid would shoot his arrow into people to cause them to fall in love. So he was feeling a little bit impish one day, and he shot his arrow at Apollo. Apollo then saw Daphne, the lovely wood nymph, and fell instantly in love with her. But Cupid also had an arrow of hate in his quiver, and he shot that arrow at Daphne. Oh, what fun he was going to have. So Daphne took one look at Apollo and decided she absolutely despised him and wanted nothing to do with him. So Apollo chases after Daphne, and she runs for all she's worth. But Apollo is a legendary racer. He's very fast. He runs after Daphne. He's about to catch up with her, and Daphne cries out to her father and says, "Father, help me!" And her dad, who is a minor water god or river god or wood god or something, turns her into a tree. So Bernini now shows this moment, the very moment when Apollo reaches Daphne and Daphne is transformed into a tree. So the moment before this, she would be a woman and Apollo would not have caught her. And the moment after this, Daphne will be a complete tree. But right now, she's in the midst of transforming, of metamorphosing into a tree. So here's Apollo, the sun god. He's reached out his hand and it touches her. As he grabs her skin, you know Apollo's thinking that he's going to be touching this soft flesh, but instead his hand finds tree bark. Her arms go up in the air. They sprout leaves. Her hair becomes leaves. Her toes become roots. Here's the hand that finds the bark over here. And here are the toes that are becoming roots and sinking down into the earth. The amazing thing to me, I mean, it's truly, truly amazing, is that Bernini carved this out of rock, out of marble, a hunk of marble. So if you thought Michelangelo's sculptures were amazing, this one really is. I found a video clip of Apollo and Daphne, and I used to link this in live classes, but this link will not work in this format. So you need to go to Canvas and you can click on the link. It's a very, very short film. The camera just moves around the sculpture so you can see the whole thing more or less in 3 dimensions. I think it's very enjoyable, so please give it a go. But it's bonus feature. If you like the story and the beauty of Apollo and Daphne, you should definitely watch it. This is another one of his pieces, perhaps his more famous piece. This is Teresa of Avila in Ecstasy. So later in his career, he was commissioned to create this for a chapel for the Cornaro family, another wealthy Italian family, not the Pope, by the way. And St. Teresa was a nun in Spain, in Avila, Spain. And I believe she stayed in isolation. So she was like a hermit. And she had these visions, and she would dictate what she saw in her visions. After her visions, she would dictate them to somebody who wrote them down. So these became pretty well known and were part of the Counter-Reformation. People just loved to read about these intense religious experiences that the saints had had. So in this particular vision, St. Teresa said that she had been visited by an angel who came into her nun's cell. And the angel had golden arrows, and with the arrows he would pierce her heart. And she found the pain just so sharp and intense, but she loved it because she knew that this pain and this angel had been sent from God. And so it kind of shows her swooning. Her body is limp, but all of the excitement of her emotional state is reflected in her robe. So you can see how they're churned up. So again, this is Bernini carving all of this out of marble and having St. Teresa floating on a gray cloud, the angel over her with the golden arrow, and behind them, golden rays that are falling from above, from heaven. So let's look at this in situ. This is in the chapel of the Cornaro family in this church in Rome. And here's St. Teresa and the angel, and it's in this little structure here with the golden rays, also illuminated. So this is the other one where Bernini has engineered sunlight to come in. He uses the sunlight to illuminate these figures. Right now, of course, this is a modern photograph and the whole area has been illuminated, but originally you have to imagine that everything around this would have been dark and St. Teresa and the angel would be lighted. Now, the thing that to me really illustrates one of the big ideas of the Counter Reformation is that Bernini included the family that commissioned this, the Cornaro family, and he puts them on either side of this scene of St. Teresa, and he puts them as little portraits sitting in a theater box. So he turns this miraculous event into theater, into drama, and he has an audience built in watching the event. In it even looks like this person of air is a program, but probably not. It's probably a Bible or the record of St. Teresa, her journal. So let's look at this. So this is all part of this whole structure that I'm sure was designed either by Bernini or people in his workshop. So this is just a side chapel in this church. This over to the right is the main altar, but it's just to the left of the main altar as you look at it. There again is the Cornaro family. And up here we've got paintings in this dome that reflect, of course, heaven. And there's a window to allow more light in. Now I'm going to show you behind the scenes how Bernini did this. So this is the window here that you see perched over St. Teresa. And then this lower window with that grate over it is where the sunlight comes in. And over here you can kind of see a surface where it's reflected and brought down to shine directly down on the figures, the carved figures. This is still there on the building today. There's some cars, so you can see that. I was just fascinated. I mean, I've taught this for years, and only recently, I think it was over the summer, I found this picture of this light well, and I'm going, oh my gosh, I can't wait to share this with my students. So this is what Bernini designed to illuminate his sculpture. This is the end of part 1 of chapter 14. Be sure to stick around for the other part.